Jalil Sahib, you have some friend from USSR? Right.
Our first guest sitting next to me is Dr. Michael Copeland. He is semi-retired and practices as a locum at the moment. He comes from Suffolk. He has been to a question answer session before at Islamabad at Al Sasana last year. In his spare time he enjoys painting, and I'm told he's a very good artist. He's also interested in boxing and serves as a medical officer locally in certain boxing rings in his area.
Right.
And his other interest is evolutionary psychology.
Evolutionary psychology? Mashallah.
Martin Egan is next. He's of Irish descent, a design engineer by profession. One of the things he's worked on is a telescopic forklift, which he's helped to design.
Telescopic what?
Forklift truck. Yes. He's interested in all things mechanical, especially World War I and World War II aircraft, and also fast cars. He studied Islam for some 2 years and accepted last year. We have next Mr. Ibrahim Mensa. He's a brother Ahmadi from Ghana. He's a trainee accountant, has been living here for some 6 years, currently residing in London. And our final guest is Timur Klychev from Tajikistan. He's a university graduate, a journalist currently serving with BBC Radio Moscow. And Ravil Bukhara will perhaps add to the introduction.
Ravil Bukhara?
Sorry, have I?
Ravil, we call him Ravil Bukhari,
I beg your
but
pardon.
the actual name is Bukharai, isn't it?
Bukharai.
Ravil Bukhara, I beg your pardon, apologize. So he will help with the interpretation.
Oh yes, you're most welcome. Please start with your questions.
I'm grateful to be asked to be at this session. My interest is whether you can have peace without religion. Experience and science together are exposing the causes of delinquency and intolerance and violence, and the increasing homicide rate in many societies, and these blossom into genocide and war. With man's increasing dominion over nature, it might be hoped that knowledge of the causes of the urges, emotional, paranoid surges and motivations of different kinds would enable man to have dominion over his own nature. My question is this: is it possible that peace between men can be achieved by this dominion over nature, or does it require the discipline that a religion imposes?
Very profound question, which relates to the entire history of human development. You are looking at it, that is the human nature, and its relation with the environment in a cross-section of time which you occupy. But if you look back to the history of evolution of civilization and sciences, every man, set him wherever you like, remote from you, back into anywhere, any point in history, his outlook would be exactly the same as yours. There is not a jot of difference. He looked down upon the early people as though they had not advanced in comparison to him enough to become their own masters or the master of the nature surrounding them. This constant remains the same throughout history, and human psyche does not change. So each time you look at their problems and the surrounding environments and life around them, the relationship would be exactly the same. You will never find man having mastered himself, although he will be found to be in a new illusion that he has mastered himself, or in future he will master himself. it is a nature, human nature, which masters him. And remove religion from the factors which discipline human conduct, remove it aside, then man will be entirely enslaved to his ego. And all the factors which will carve a path for him to deal with himself and deal with the environment and the other human beings and other nations will always be ego. The prime occupation of ego, which will dominate man and his surroundings. And this is exactly the problem which we face today. All societies, religious or so-called religious, irreligious, and other ethnic groups like East and West and North and South and so on and so forth, they're all governed by their egos. And religion is neither here nor there. Religion is a completely different thing and different attitude, according to me, which, if it plays a part, will play a satisfactory, successful part. Otherwise, religion is just a name used by various people in the world. What they follow is an irreligious service or worship to their own ego, no more. That is the problem which surrounds us today and which is increasing in intensity with the passage of time. If you look around with a detached look, I am quite certain you will come to the same conclusion. So that is the first thing which I have to answer in response to this question. If you agree with this analysis, well and good. If not, I would like you to raise a few objections to this analysis, then I will handle them, and after that we will be prepared for any role of God in the affairs of men. If it is possible, what sort of role God should play. If not possible, then we have already surrendered to hopelessness. Right? I would like you to opine on this much. If you agree with this analysis or not. If not, what do you find instead to be operative in human affairs?
May I wait till it comes round again, sir?
Please, of course. That's what I'm suggesting.
Sure.
What I mean to say is that if you agree with this analysis of what's happening in the world in any good name, if you agree with that, then I can follow the next step.
Yes.
Should I? Right.
I'd be grateful. Yes.
Good. You see, the problem is that all crimes are nurtured in darkness, which surrounds human intentions, and no law is capable of reaching the point of the heart, or whatever you call it, where crime first takes roots. It always takes roots deep below in the recesses of human psyche, where man feels secure, completely secure from observing eyes. And human-made laws can never reach that spot. That is the major problem, because they have no access to the point where the crime is nurtured or it takes root. The criminal is always safe. Psychologically, I mean, he always feels himself safe. When he has bad intentions or whatever he has in the mind, he knows that no one on earth can recognize that, can register that fact. With the result that the law, when you pursue the cases in the courts, always gives this benefit of doubt to the criminal. It's up to the criminal to say, no, I didn't have any intention of this. It gives this benefit of doubt, as well as uses this benefit of doubt for the sake of society. If a crime is committed and then the criminal says, my intention was not this, law will not listen to that. The law will condemn him as a criminal who acted as if with intention. And in this we find many injustices committed. In a large number of cases, the intentions attributed to the criminal are not the intentions of the criminal, but he can't prove anything. So the lack of access to the root or the soil of the crime makes our law incapable of delivering justice as it should be delivered. On the other hand, if a criminal acts criminally towards his society, but his crime is not detected as having been committed, then nobody can say this man is a threat to the peace. While he will remain to be a threat to the peace, his intentions will remain hidden within him, and many such would-be criminals are out and about in the society, who create havoc with the peace of the society, but we cannot hold them before they are able to enact what they think they should do. That is the state of affairs. Now, who can reach the heart, if anyone? If there is a God, then he can. If there is no God, the problem remains unsolved. Because in a godless society, you give cover to all criminal intents, and human law is incapable of uprooting crime. The more godless you become, the society becomes, the more daring it becomes. And unfortunately, our society is moving away from the concept of God into an area where God is rebelled against openly and clearly. Now this breeds a sort of honesty as well. Honesty in the sense that if one doesn't believe, he doesn't have to be a hypocrite in declaring himself to be a believer. So the case of such people is honest, as well as they are invited to do whatever they like, because there is no accountability. So accountability also goes overboard. And in a society as we share today, this is the major problem. The concept of accountability is deteriorating rapidly. And the concept of accountability has to be invariably related to the life after death. Otherwise, there is no accountability. These are all the concomitant problems which we face. Those who believe in God, they have to believe in life after death. Otherwise, the doors which open to death will be opening to redemption, human redemption from whatever he has committed. So death will be a blessing in this sense for the criminal, but death for the honest sufferer will be hell. because he will die never having been revenged, the sense of having been transgressed against, and with no hope that he can ever quench his thirst for, call it revenge or whatever it is, but those who are transgressed against do have a thirst for something, have a craving for something. Some innocent children are slaughtered in the sight of their parents, or heinous crimes are committed against them. They lived with that suffering all their life, and when death comes, it opens the door to total frustration, no hope, if there is no God. But if there is a God, then the story is completely different. Then every death opens a door either to punishment or to reward. And it opens a door to a world which is not this world but a world to come, where the one who sits on the seat of judgment is all-knowing. If he is not all-knowing, then the whole story is wrong. So this brings us to the point that even if one does not believe in God, he must believe in the fact that the belief in God is essential. No gainsaying that. That is why some atheists also support this concept of religion while not believing in it themselves, because they think it is essential for the society. But the society, if it is not given a right course of conduct, which has to be shaped by God's design, would not know what to do and what not to do. What are the individual responsibilities to others? What are the responsibilities of groups to other groups, and so on and so forth? So you have raised a question which is tantamount to opening a Pandora's box. So many things follow which have to be deeply analyzed, and I think we should rest the case here for a while. Let's go around and
Grateful. Thank you.
please.
Thank you. With more and more people from different cultures coming to Ahmadiyya, do you see any changes, or how do you see this affecting Ahmadiyya?
In fact, it is a good news and a bad news as well. Those who come into Ahmadiyya, they offer themselves to us to work upon them, and the preaching begins from then on. They come with good points, they come with bad points. Their cultural backgrounds, their racial backgrounds differ, and their traditional good or evil habits also differ. So it's a huge problem we are confronting in the entire world. Problems relating to USSR countries are different. That is, their moral problems, their social, economic problems, and so are the problems of African countries, and African countries also differ from one to the other. So I have to sit on this and to command the whole situation from this place, despite my humility and despite my nothingness. So, because I believe in God, so I have to pray regularly, day in and day out, for help from God. And because that help comes, and I can see it descending, so my faith in Him increases with the passage of time. But without His help, it is an impossible problem which cannot be resolved. The only instrument which I tell Ahmadis to be armed with is honesty. and truth. If they themselves are true and honest, this is something which is contagious in human nature. People think it's only evil which penetrates human nature and people accept evil. There is a paradox in this situation. Man craves for goodness, yet he adopts evil. This is the major paradox which we are confronting. He adopts evil because he thinks he can gain more for himself. But he likes goodness because if people are good to him, he likes it. He does not want to be a target of egos of others. So it's a paradox. He wants good, he likes goodness, he knows it's good. And that is why many a time he preaches goodness to his children, to his wife and other relatives, even friends, while he himself is an evil person. So deep below, the verdict of psyche, a human psyche, is that goodness is good. We must crave for it. And the cry of the ego is, don't listen to this voice. You will be much better off if you, for yourself, you chart a different route completely, and which should ultimately be directed to serve your cause and not the cause of the society. With all these problems confronting us, I'm strongly exhorting Ahmadiyya people who convert others that they must themselves be true and honest, because this truth in them will be catching. Because those with whom we are dealing, they come with a mind to accept the new influences. They are not like ordinary people whose egos are dragging them away. They also have their egos, but they have decided to benefit from the new society which they accept. And they can only be benefited if the people who preach to them, first of all, preach to themselves and become models in absolute justice, absolute honesty, absolute truth. These absolute values, which most of the philosophers deny, are most essential for bringing about a revolution in the world. Without absoluteness, you can't bring universality of character, bring about universality of character. And this is what we are trying to achieve. And with the grace of Allah, we are more successful in African countries than elsewhere. Because primitive as they are in many things, they are also innocent. And what they believe sincerely. Otherwise the conversion would never have taken place. Because from whichever society we draw them, that society is invariably antagonistic to Ahmadiyya, very hostile. So if they sacrifice their personal interests and break away from a society which is trying to drag back into their own rut, that means that they are convinced of the truth. So if they are convinced of the truth, they would readily offer themselves for us to work upon them. And this I find applicable far more in Africa than in other places. For instance, in European society and some other societies, this antagonism is not shown in the way that it is shown in third world and African societies. So we hope that these people will begin to change for the better. And they are showing signs of that change for the better with the grace of Allah. Will that be enough for the
Yes,
handling? Yes, please.
thank you.
And I would like you to ask a question about your engineering skills and this and that, which you have not touched upon, have you?
No.
No, not yet. Not yet. Maybe in the next question or the next you may. Please.
See, I understood that as Muslims, we don't have to receive interest on savings. On savings. In this case, what is the Islamic concept of banking?
See, we are raising a question again which requires a very large answer. The very crux of capitalism is based on the philosophy that the money increases by itself. So if somebody puts his money in the bank, it must increase. But capitalism forgets that money also decreases, and it must be wedded to the qualities of mind. Then either it will increase or it will decrease. So why should we assume that the money deposited in the banks must increase, which is contrary to the facts of life? Some banks go bankrupt. Some banks are controlled by very crooked people, so that all the money which is apparently increasing suddenly sinks down, goes down to the bottom without any trace of it left. Islamic concept of banking is based on a completely different philosophy. According to the founder of Islam, money neither increases by itself nor decreases by itself. It's only the human values which are wedded to the money which decide either in the favor of one or the favor of the other. So Islam provides a system of banking whereby the deposit holder will be a shareholder and will have his say in the matters of how banks are run. Every shareholder will choose his representatives to control the policy of the bank and to see to it that the things are done with honesty. No such bank exists in the world. The shareholders and those who command things sit on the top. They have nothing to do with the common investor or those who deposit a small saving in the bank. The result that a large number of people whose money is deposited have no say in the matters of how the bank should be run. So according to Islamic system, this is a must. If the bank runs into loss, the depositor will also run into loss. If the bank runs into profit, the depositor also will run into profit. But the ratio will be different from bank to bank, from country to country maybe. But supposing it's one country, one bank will be showing much larger profits because of honesty and sensible employment of the money. Some other banks in the same economic situation will show losses or even bankruptcy. So gradually honesty will become a most prized commodity. The money will begin to shift in favor of those banks which show better results, both in their employment of honesty and their employment of wisdom. This system has worked most successfully in the past eras of Islamic so-called banking system. Hazrat Imam Abu Hanifa, who is one of the top jurists in Islam, his case can be illustrated or can be illustrative in this sense. He was a very successful businessman, and because he was also extremely honest, the society trusted him so much that they threw their money in small bags like things and bundles, etc., writing their name on it and permitting Imam Abu Hanifa to employ this money to good cause. If there is any profit, it should be remitted back to them, their portion of it. And he was a multi-millionaire in his time because of this. His bank flourished because he had both the qualities, honesty and skill. So this means that in every society in the modern times, if these values are adopted, the economy will flourish, and the setbacks to economy which happen from time to time would be avoided, except in relation to foreign trade, for instance, and some other factors which are not in control, within control of the local businessmen of that country. But of that I have thought, and I think I have an answer to the whole system, but it's a very long story. I should like to be forgiven for the time being, please. Now let's go to Russia.
What about Tajikistan? You said different country now.
Tajikistan.
Tajikistan. Yes. Timur is only learning English, so he asked me to put his question because of him. Yes. His first question is about use of force, Hazur. To what extent it is permitted, and when it becomes a vicious circle of use of force?
Use of force is a neutral figure of speech. Who is using it and why? Without determining these questions, you cannot answer the question at all.
He was speaking about widespread violence in the world.
That is the use of force. Against that widespread violence, use of force will be used to suppress it. By whom? By the people who themselves are corrupt, who are part of the system of violence. So no problem is resolved by this attitude. That's why I said, who is using the instrument of force and why is he doing it? To what degree he expects better results? That is the question. In daily life, in our treatment with our children, we find that the use of force is not always profitable. It depends on the children you are dealing with. Some children are so refined in their attitudes that use of force will hurt them and injure them. But if you love them and punish them by withdrawing your love for a while, that would be the greatest punishment to them, and they will react by reforming themselves and loving you the more for it. But if undisciplined children who have a bad ingrained habit of usurping others' rights, stealing or doing this and that, the parents know better. They know that if such children are given a license to do whatever they like, they would grow from evil to evil, until when they are thrown out in the society, hardened criminals are begin to circulate. So these problems are not as simple as to be answered in yes or no. They're very complicated problems. Looking at it from the social point of view and the point of view of governments, coercion cannot be an answer to everything, and forgiveness cannot be an answer to everything either. So again, the same problem which was raised, which was discussed in relation to your question, raise its head again. So you cannot resolve the problems of any society unless you acquire an attitude of responsibility and answerability. No problem can be resolved. Otherwise, if you consider the use of force to be permissible for the state to discipline a society, most communist states will use this license to discipline their own people as best as they like, would be used to the disadvantage of the system itself. It will not create any results. I have written a lot on this subject in relation to the fall of the communist empire. The main reason why we saw it crumble down, not entirely to pieces as some people think, but it did crumble down, is the lack of honesty in the people who ran the system. And they gained a few temporary advantages out of that dishonesty. But in the long run, it was the same dishonesty which caused their downfall. This requires a detailed analysis, for which I do not find time now here, but I'll provide him with the book in which I have discussed all these things, inshallah. And if he understands English well, I hope it will help him. Would you like to translate it to him?
No, I
just what?
Вопрос заключается не в том, каким образом, то есть это абстрактный вопрос, применение силы или насилия и так далее, что когда оно превращается в порочный круг. Вопрос заключается в том, насколько, кто, во-первых, употребляет это насилие, с какой целью употребляет второе. То есть, вкратце, существуют ситуации, в которых насилие является благом, существуют ситуации, в которых оно является абсолютным злом. Но нельзя, самое главное, нельзя найти такую схему, в которой можно полностью описать, в каких случаях это благо, в каких это зло. То есть опять вопрос идет туда же, в какой степени религия играет роль в обществе и в какой степени честность, абсолютная честность играет роль свою в обществе. Хазур говорит, что он написал, очень много писал о том, почему, например, рухнули коммунистические государства, не до конца еще, но почему они рухнули. И в частности, одной из главных вещей являлось то, что абсолютное бесчестие тех людей, которые руководили этими странами. Это, конечно, более глубокий вопрос. Хазур написал много книг, и он тебе подарит иншаллах, эти книги, в которых существует, так сказать, детальное обсуждение этих проблем. Но вопрос, так сказать, слишком абстрактен для того, чтобы ответить на него однозначно.
Как говорил, если верить Библии, говорил Иисус Христос, если тебя ударили по одной щеке, подставь другую, и что, может быть, насилие вот это абстрактное и в политике, и в социальное насилие порождает насилие, когда зло порождает зло. Может быть,
слушай, можно запретить его?
Нет, не запретить, а не если покорность насилию, вот это вот следование этому правилу «подставь щеку», это как бы способ, когда можно разомкнуть порочный круг. Или
actually, the question he now spoke of Jesus and his instruction about turning another cheek when somebody strikes you, one cheek, and he says, to what extent this may be a general principle for the world behavior?
There's no answer, unfortunately. The whole Christian history is witness to the fact that this is no answer. But leaving that aside, because it will be another question of criticizing the so-called Christian values which are attributed to Jesus Christ. In my opinion, Jesus Christ is one of the most misunderstood persons in the history of the world. But that is another subject which I can follow with evidence, of course. Here let me point out additionally that Marxism was built not on dialectical materialism. That was what followed. It was built on the conviction of Marx that man is an immoral animal. So if you leave things to man to discipline himself, he will always act immorally. Right? This is the first brick laid by Marx, which was the brick which was the undoing of communism itself. Because if he is right in his analysis that humans are immoral, then he is wrong in his conclusion that any system can produce results as though humans who are responsible for running the systems are moral. They will remain immoral because communism cannot change their psyche. So it was built on paradoxes. First of all, he denied humans to be able to dispense with absolute justice anywhere in the society because they are immoral. Then he proposes a system which has to be run by immoral people, and the same problem will appear. That immoral people never run a system with morality, and the system itself is just a mechanism in their hands which they will employ to their own personal advantage rather than the advantage of the society. That is the reason why communist empire collapsed, because those responsible for running it became more and more immoral, more and more insensitive to the real requirements of the masses they governed. And because this was realized by the masses, so they had to use coercion. The question of coercion comes here. They had to be dealt with iron hands, like Stalin did, because there was no running away from it. People knew that wrong is being done to them in the name of good, and those who command and control the affairs, they are corrupt, they are selfish, with the result that to keep the discipline properly, and not properly but permanently saddled, coercion is necessary. And the wrong concept of coercion, where it should not have been used. So that is the entire history of communism, starting from Lenin himself. The bullets which riddled the masses who were raising their voice for bread at the early time of Lenin is a proof. Then what happened throughout the history of Stalin being in command, and whatever followed is exactly the same story repeated differently in different postures. Please.
Это, к сожалению, не ответ. И Хазур говорит, что по существу, по его убеждению, Иисус — это один из самых неправильно понятых людей на свете, потому что вся история христианства показывает, что этот принцип, к сожалению, нигде и никогда не работал. Он просто не жизнеспособен, поэтому он и не работал, а не потому что кто-то не хотел его употреблять. И Хазур говорит, что вопрос, конечно, гораздо шире, потому что когда приходит насилие, вот марксизм говорит, что марксизм был построен на парадоксе сам по себе, потому что он происходил не из диалектического материализма, а из того, что Маркс поставил аксиомой, что человек есть безнравственное животное. Поэтому если человека предоставить самому себе, то он обязательно будет действовать безнравственно. Вот это была аксиома марксизма, из которой все вытекло. Но тогда одновременно Маркс предложил, так сказать, систему государства, которая бы была более справедлива, но не учел, что при этом это государство будет руководимо по его же аксиоме безнравственными людьми. которые для того, чтобы достигать своих целей, будут применять насилие. И чем более безнравственные люди употребляют, так сказать, механизм справедливого государства, по их мнению, это превращается в насилие и в насилие. То есть насилие начинается с безнравственности, с отсутствия честности у людей, которым доверено, что бы это делать. Если они отвечают, допустим, не перед Богом, не имеют понятия абсолютной справедливости, а следуют только справедливости своего собственного эго, вот отсюда проистекает насилие, и это насилие, так сказать, со знаком минус. Насилие отрицательное, потому что оно употребляется для принуждения людей к тому, чего они не понимают и, в общем, может быть, даже не должны понимать.
Thank you very much for the answer to my question. And I very much appreciate your picture of the depth of the human psyche, which can only be reached by God. Is there a force that can desensitize the effect of God reaching into the human soul? Satan is mentioned in the Quran.
I have discussed this question, very important and fundamental question. I have discussed this at greater length in the book which I have been mentioning so many times, which has been delivered to the press now with the grace of Allah at last. And if you study, I hope you will study that, write down their names. I'll give you as a gift that copy, and you can choose the chapters which you like. You don't have to read the whole book right from the beginning to the end, although I should like you to do that. But the theme is the same, which runs through all the chapters. From the point of view of someone who does not believe in God, what is the importance of revelation? What is the authenticity of the Quranic claim that this book has been revealed by God? And when applied to human problems, what answers or solutions are suggested by this book? And does human psyche support them or not? This is the main theme of the book. And during this attempt of mine to prove that revelation is nothing but rationality, and there is no divide between the two, I have answered all these important questions like the one you have raised, and have tried to prove that revelation is the source of everything, and without revelation we cannot resolve any problem. Even in science, revelation has played a vital role in the advancement of science. How and where is the evidence for that? I have given that in the book concerned. So inshallah, inshallah means God willing, if you find time to read this, I hope very much many of your questions will be answered satisfactorily. Okay. I'm avoiding a detailed answer because of the time, this time is running out very rapidly now. Please. I turn to you, yes.
Many people believe there will be big changes with the new millennium. Do you see
Big change?
Yes.
In
They
what?
believe there will be new changes. People
With the new millennium.
with the new
With the
millennium.
new millennium.
I don't think there will be any divide between this and that millennium at all. You are gradually moving forward towards whatever graves we have dug for ourselves. The joint of the millennium will not change any difference in the direction of that movement. And when I said for whatever graves we have dug for ourselves, I mean that. So the next millennium will see the unfortunately, it will see uglier situations than we have seen in the previous century. How it will happen and why, these are the questions which should at this point better be left alone, because they will require much longer discussion. And I believe that this issue has also been discussed previously in my book, and what we are heading for and why, and is this the design of God for us to be annihilated altogether? If not, what are the windows of hope? In which direction they open? And how can we go through those windows into a world of hope for the future? These are very important questions which I have attempted to resolve in the said book. This is rationality, revelation, rationality, knowledge and truth. This is or truth and knowledge. This is the title of the book. So I hope you will be able to see many things in that, and also the mechanical problems will be also mentioned, which is your subject perhaps of interest, isn't it? Please.
So, second question is, as a Muslims or as Ahmadi, are we allowed, for instance, if at my workplace they organize at my workplace they organize at the end of the year party in public or drinking bar, as a Muslim, are we allowed to attend such occasion or not?
See, the drinking bouts are found everywhere in the society. Either you retreat from the society altogether, or it's impossible to avoid people who are drinking around you. Only situation where you can avoid drinking is by inviting drinking people to your home, to your party, and not serving them with drinks. Serving them with soft drinks, for instance, and permitting them to leave as early as their desire would draw them away. When they're craving for drink. That's what I do. But when I go to others and participate in their society, social functions, I accept them to drink, and I don't mind it at all. I mind only in the sense as a concern for them, but I don't mind in the sense of objection against that. Please.
We would ask permission to visit next session and put our question there, maybe, because we would ask permission to visit this session next Sunday with the question, because the question, I think, a very profound one. Why there is this unity?
Raise it now.
Why there is this unity between different sects of Islam in the world?
Oh, this is a very common question, because the concept of unity of God differs. So there has to be disunity. It is impossible for you to believe in one God and have disunity among yourselves. Disunity means there has to be something wrong in their understanding of the unity of God, or their honesty in professing adherence to that unity. If you are dishonest, then at every point of decision making, you will not decide in the favor of what God desires. You will always decide in favor of what you desire. So that shows that your belief in unity is just a superficial claim, while actually you do not believe in it. Otherwise, if you genuinely believe in unity, it's impossible for such a society to be divided. Now, I quote the example of Jamaat Ahmadiyya and its spread, as it was mentioned earlier. we belong to now perhaps more than 160 countries of the world. All Ahmadis, whether they are black or white or yellow or red, they are completely united. So much so that when they come to England during our annual conference, the British immigration officers are always surprised to find that unity among them. Some have mentioned it to me themselves when they came to meet me, and it is a common thing that they recognize an Ahmadi whether he is coming from Africa or China or Japan or Middle East. They always recognize him because these people are trained intelligence officers in fact. All the immigration officers have to be highly trained in intelligence. So I notice this, and when they come to meet me sometimes, they tell me themselves, from whichever country an Ahmadi comes, we recognize he has to be an Ahmadi. Why? Because he's a common bearing, attitude. There is a sense of nobility and truth writ all over his person. And he does not seem to be an ordinary visitor to England who requires something to be gained personally from his visit to England. Explain this, and that this question is answered. For the next session, he'll have to find some new ones.
Значит, вопрос, различные секты ислама потому не могут найти общего языка, потому что они различно понимают Божье единство, понятие Божьего единства, и более того, непонятно, в какой степени они и насколько искренне они понимают и говорят то, что они понимают, насколько они служат не той идее исламской Божьего единства и Божьей справедливости, насколько в какой степени они служат своим собственным порывам, своим собственным политическим и экономическим выгодам. Вот от этого все возникает, и по существу иначе и быть не может. Если у людей разный Бог и разные понятия о нем, то, естественно, между ними не может быть единства, того, что Бог хочет от них. Назур привел пример Ахмади, говорит, что приходили сюда иммиграционные офицеры, которые вот пускают в Англию. Была встреча, говорит, что они были поражены, потому что Ахмади, которые сейчас принадлежат к 160 более чем странам мира и к различным расам, абсолютно разные культура разные, традиции разные. Мы всегда узнаем человека, который является Ахмади, только потому, что у них само отношение, вот их вид и отношение к миру, смирение и достоинство, которые они в себе несут, и полное ощущение того, что они едины, кто бы они ни был, китайцы, папуасы, негры и так далее, в любом конце мира они едины, и нет более единой общины исламской, чем ахмадийская в этом смысле. Вот это вопрос о том, насколько люди верят в одного Бога и насколько они постигают воистину то, что Он от них хочет в единстве своем. Вот, а к следующему другой вопрос уже приготовился.
So that brings us to the close of this session, because only 1 minute some seconds are left. In that small time, no new question can be asked and answered. So with that, I first of all express my gratitude to all of you for your coming, because to meet intellectuals is one of the greatest pleasures which I receive in my life. Otherwise, it's a very busy life. Some may call it drudgery, but it is not drudgery because I am deeply devoted to my work. But still, meeting intellectuals from different countries, different places, is an immense pleasure to me. And I believe that intellectuals are the same, whether they are black or white or red or whatever they are. Intellectuals are always the same. And there has to be a concept of neutrality attached to intellectualism and non-prejudice. So because I am used to debating things with the mullahs, with the orthodoxy of one form or the other, which is in fact a drudgery, it gives me such a relaxed opportunity an opportunity to relax myself, which is brought by you, by your taking pains to come here. So thank you again, and I hope to meet you all again.
Thank you, sir.
Al-Fadl.
MTA International, reaching the corners of the earth.